Good morning, Emperor Eagles. Happy Tuesday. Tomorrow, many of you start state testing, and I wanted to read a book to give you a little encouragement and have a few thoughts. So today's book is called Just Because by Matthew McConaughey. If you've heard the name, that's the name. He's a famous actor. And this book was given to me by Miss Penn to borrow to read, and it's for a very good reason. Just because. Just because they threw the dart doesn't mean that it stuck. Just because I've got skills doesn't mean there is no luck. Just because they let you down doesn't mean you gotta get low. Just because they're clumsy doesn't mean they have no flow. Just because you answer doesn't mean you heed the call. Just because I'm at the top, it doesn't mean I cannot fall. Just because I let go doesn't mean that I stop climbing. Just because I mean it doesn't mean that I'm not lying. Just because I'm finished doesn't mean I'm done. Just because you got the gold, it doesn't mean you won. Just because you wrote it doesn't mean I read it. Just because I did it again doesn't mean I regret it. Just because you can pull it off doesn't mean that you should do it. Just because you failed doesn't mean that you blew it. Just because they say it's so doesn't mean it happened to me. There's how I see it, how you see it, and what will come to be. Just because you threw shade doesn't mean I'm out of the sun. Just because they shut me down doesn't mean I haven't won. Just because you're wailing doesn't make you a crier. Just because I lied, it doesn't make you a liar. Just because they can choose doesn't mean you don't have a choice. Just because they don't hear you doesn't mean you don't have a voice. Just because it's silent doesn't mean it's not loud. Just because you're alone doesn't mean there's not a crowd. Just because I'm dirty doesn't mean I can't get clean. Just because you're nice doesn't mean you can't get mean. Just because I'm going in circles doesn't mean I don't get dizzy. Just because I'm sitting still, it doesn't mean I'm not busy. Just because we're friends doesn't mean you can't burn me. Just because I'm stubborn doesn't mean you can't turn me. Just because I forgive you doesn't mean that I still trust. There's what you do, there's what I do. And yours is not my must. Just because it's fiction doesn't mean it can't be true. Just because you want one more doesn't mean that you need two. Just because you're a bully doesn't mean that you're strong. Just because it felt right doesn't mean it won't feel wrong. Just because a hand is clenched, it doesn't mean it's a fist. Just because I'd rather not doesn't mean I don't take risks. Just because I'm in the race doesn't mean I'm fully ready. Just because you're shaking doesn't mean that you're not steady. Just because you follow doesn't mean you're not a leader. Just because I keep winning doesn't mean I'm not a cheater. Just because we disagree doesn't mean that you're not right. Just because it's dark doesn't mean that it's night. Just because the sun has set doesn't mean it will not rise, because every day is a gift, each one a new surprise. I love this book for a million reasons, and there's so much we could talk about in this book. And if you ever want to borrow it, come see Miss Penn, because it truly has so much to offer each one of our students. But I love the fact, especially when we start state testing, that just because you take a test, it doesn't make you who you are. Just because you may have gotten a low score last year doesn't mean you can't get a high score this year. Just because you don't understand the test doesn't mean you still shouldn't try. And so there's so many options with the test, but in the end, what matters to me is, are you a good, kind human being? Are you being a leader? Are you being helpful to each other? If you have your hand into a fist, do you make it into a hug? Are there ways that you can change something that used to be into something that might be? And so as you enter the state testing, I want you to have all the confidence in the world. Do not worry about what was. Try on what is right now and see what it can become, because you never know what will happen if you try. But just know that you are more than a number. You are a good, kind human being who is trying to be a leader in the school and trying to make the best choices. And even when you don't, we forgive you and we move on. And I want you to try your best over the next couple weeks with your words, with your actions, with your kindness to your teachers and your parents, to be on time, to eat your breakfast, to get a good night's sleep. And just know that I believe in each and every single one of you. I love you all, and I hope you have a good day.